The Mindset Advantage, a podcast by Arcadia Consulting, architects of change.
Change is difficult to execute if the team are suffering or absent. In this episode, Robert Rosales is joined by Cachet Prescott to discuss how leaders can support their team's well-being, have those much-needed open conversations, and facilitate the appropriate actions.
Welcome to this episode of the Mindset Advantage podcast series. I'm Robert Rosales at Arcadia Consulting. I design and deliver programs that inspire people to perform at their best. And today's episode focuses on wellness and well-being as a mindset advantage. And joining me is my colleague, Cachet Prescott, who's been studying human flourishing in the workplace for years and is passionate about the topic of thriving through change. Hi, Cachet, welcome.
Hello, Robert, and thank you for such an amazing introduction. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're an amazing individual.
Thank you so much. And I am excited for us to chat about this topic of well-being and wellness. And it is really in line with things that really excite me. I come from a social sciences background. And so my background's in IO psychology, which is the study of business and workplace psychology. So this is right on time. And within our organization, one of my areas of focus is the people experience. So this definitely lends to the things that I'm interested in and the conversation at hand today. So I'm really excited for us to jump right in.
Likewise. Thank you. Can you tell us something about you that our listeners might be curious to know? And how did you get excited about this topic?
So in terms of the topic in and of itself, I think I kind of fell into these topics of just workplace and people in the workplace, the human side of the workplace. As I mentioned, I'm a social scientist, so I have a degree in sociology and I have a degree in IO psychology. And I wasn't sure what I planned to do with that, but as I started my own personal career, I noticed a lot of things about people and their experiences and, what contributed to them being happy in the workplace, what contributed to them being successful in the workplace, and what contributed to feelings of fulfillment, even in my own personal journey. And as I started to pay more attention to that and had opportunities to, do facilitation like we do through our, work with Arcadia and just indulge with other people and engage with other people, it was like a light bulb went off for me. The things that really excited me were the areas in which I was able to help people, to maximize people in some capacity. And so part of the journey in being able to maximize individuals is making sure that they are well enough to thrive, that making sure that they feel at their best. And so that's what kind of got me on the path and just looking at the role of wellness and well-being in this conversation. It's not enough to sharpen people's skills in these areas. It's not enough to, teach them a whole host of things that will help them, be a better leader or better, whatever, insert here, whatever the title is. If they don't show up as their best selves in terms of their health, and that's physical health, mental health, the well-rounded picture of who they are as an individual, none of those other things matter. And so that's why, for me, this is such an important conversation, something I fell into, but something that I particularly am passionate about. And I also worked for an organization, a university a few years ago, where they really took the conversation about well-being to the next level. They made it the focus of all of their work among the faculty members, the staff members, students. It's something that is a part of their culture. And that really stuck with me and is something that I continue to really kind of focus on in the work that I do, even with our clients and within our organization. That is a main focus for me as well.
Right. Yeah, thank you. That's fascinating. And it certainly is a topic that when I joined the workforce many, many years ago was not on the table. There was no concept of well-being at work. And today it is such a trending topic. So I'm curious to know, Cachet, how do you manage your own well-being and sense of wellness? What are your self-care rituals?
Well, that has definitely been a journey because I am someone that is definitely a high achiever and and also self-admittedly an overachiever at times. And
welcome to the club.
Exactly. I was going to say, I'm sure you can relate.
I do.
But there is often a price you pay for that as well. For me, the default had been go, 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 go until something stopped me. And it was usually, just feeling bad, being stressed out, being overwhelmed, being burned out. And that was not productive. It didn't help me in my aspirations to get things done. It didn't help me in my aspirations to, achieve whatever the next thing was. And so it took a few times of me being stopped before I became proactive about really paying attention to my own well-being and my own wellness journey. And so now I am very intentional about noticing the signs of when those things are rearing their ugly heads. So if I'm feeling that stress and, paying attention to how it shows up in my body, if my shoulders are starting to feel heavy or, there's pain or I'm achy, I start paying attention to those things because before I would have just worked through and pushed through, but I pay attention to those things. If I'm feeling tired, exhausted, if I feel that burnout, then I know that it's time for me to pivot in some way, shape, or form and do something different before I end up, again, getting stopped in the process. So for me, self-care looks like I love getting massages. So when I am able to do so, I will get a 90-minute massage if possible, and the deep tissue. I love a deep tissue massage. So I do that, or something as simple as just going to get a pedicure. Just having time where I can just sit and be and not do is key for me.
Right.
I from time to time will try meditation. I'm not consistent at all with meditation, but I do have a few apps on my phone in which I try to take a moment to just be and to be mindful of that moment. I'm somebody that can struggle with being present because I'm always thinking about the next thing or what what there is to do next. And so being really mindful about being mindful has been key for me. And I'm also someone that learns by teaching. So I've taught a few different mindfulness workshops and courses before. So now it tasks me with being accountable for being mindful, because if I am telling other people about it, I need to practice it in some way, shape, or form. But also sleep is important for me. I am not someone that does well off a little bit of sleep. So I have an Apple Watch and I have an app on my phone and on my watch that tracks my sleep. So as I'm sleeping, it, shows me when I've fallen into that REM sleep, or if, how long I've had uninterrupted sleep, or if there were times where I was waking up, what's going on. So I can pay attention to that and key into what might be going on. And my mind runs 1,000,000 miles per hour. So sometimes it's just me trying to calm my mind down, making sure that before I go to sleep, I'm not checking work email or checking, things that are not going to help me relax in some way, shape, or form. So just being really mindful and asking for help. That's another one that's been key for me. I'm typically a person that tries to do it all in some capacity. And also, I am a Black female, and there is this trope of the strong Black woman, which started off as being an empowering thing, but in recent years has become more of a dangerous thing, because people think that we are so strong that we don't need help. They think we're so strong that we can't be vulnerable at times and have moments of, potential weakness where we might need help. We might feel things because of, whatever might be going on around us. And so trying to move past those views of who I am and really embrace the fact that I am, first of all, a human being that goes through things, that needs help, and being comfortable with asking for that help as well and accepting it has been key for me as well.
Yeah, so a lot of awareness and self-awareness. And as you say, it's a journey.
It's
a journey. You're at work. you think you need to be on the go all the time and thinking about the next one and overachieving. It comes with the territory. And then I don't know if it's with experience or as we mature, but we tend to realize that, wow, we all have our limits. And if you want to be a top performer, you need to pace yourself somehow, which doesn't mean slowing down necessarily, but, picking your battles maybe. And I love when you mentioned learning, because I've noticed that in your workshops and podcasts, you often mention unlearning as a very powerful means to personal growth, to well-being. Is that a strategy that you've also applied to yourself? And are there maybe other strategies that you would advocate that you don't practice yourself?
Absolutely. Robert, since you know me, I'm all about unlearning.
Yeah.
And it's definitely been one of those strategies that I've applied to my life and applied it to this concept of my own well-being and wellness, because there are things that I have picked up over the years that may have served me in some capacity before that no longer serve who I want to be, no longer serve the person that wants to really be intentional about, her wellness, be intentional about, producing these good well-being habits and behaviors. And so I've had to be really cognizant about the things that get in the way of that.
Well, what would be an example of that?
I would say, again, going back to when I was talking about that go personality, part of that was me just trying to be helpful to other people. When people would ask me, hey, can you do this? I'm trying to be helpful, and there may be some people pleasing in there as well, but it was to my own detriment. So part of my unlearning had to be in the unlearning yes at all times.
Wow. Unlearning yes. And not become a giver that turns into a doormat.
Exactly. I was not being a smart giver. It was working against me. Yes, I helped other individuals, but to what cost to myself, what cost to my own sanity, what cost to my own well-being, when there were times where I was just stressed out beyond measure in those moments. And so I had to unlearn yes, and be intentional about my yeses. There was a book that I saw that's called The Best Yes. And I had to really figure out what my best yeses were and learn to say no and be okay with saying no, and learn to, say no without explaining myself. And so it started off with the unlearning of that particular habit and the building up of this new habit of saying no as needed and taking time to think about things before I responded, because I'd always respond with the quick yes and then would regret it at some point in time. So that's where it's really kind of shown up for me. In terms of just other strategies that I've heard for other people, of course, there are a number of people where exercise is their go-to. I don't exercise consistently, although I should. But we have an elliptical at the house, and it really does feel amazing when I do make the time to get on the elliptical and just kind of burn off the stress and whatever's going on in that moment. But exercise works for people. Really being focused on your nutrition and what you're putting in your body is something that many of us should do, and many people do, to really focus on, again, their wellness and their well-being. It could be in terms of just breathing, having a moment where, hey, if something's going on, let me take a few breaths, 10 seconds, and just breathe in, breathe out, so I can create some space between me and this thing, and allow myself to de-stress in some way, shape, or form. Could be yoga, or just simply having conversations with other people, whether that is a close confidant, whether that is your therapist or counselor in some way, shape, or form, and relying on those that are around you, really walking in that concept of teamwork and not thinking you have to do it all by yourself. It really is about setting boundaries in some way, shape, or form for many of us that we don't set for a variety of reasons, but being clear on the things that do or don't work for you, setting those boundaries and sticking to them are the things that I've seen, and I've also tried to utilize myself in terms of really creating this space for well-being, or positive well-being and wellness for myself.
Right. Yeah. Creating a space. It reminds me of some of the activities that we do at Arcadia for our employees and others, in fact. And
Yes.
one of them that comes to mind is the Wednesday workouts that are led by our friends in the UK. Every Wednesday morning, I wake up and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I feel like doing this. And 30 minutes later, I feel so energized. I feel so ready for anything. I'm like, why don't you do this every morning? And I don't prioritize it. I don't know about you, but do you have any tips as to how to prioritize well-being and self-care?
Well, one thing that I think for me personally that works for me is scheduling it. If I put it on my schedule, put it in my calendar, those are the things that typically tend to get done. So for me, that has worked. Also for me, I also know that I am a morning person. So if I'm going to do it, it needs to be in the morning. If I try to fool myself into thinking, well, I'll just wait till, this evening or even this afternoon, it's most likely not going to get done. I need to get up early, get it out the way. And so it sets the tone for my day. So for me, those are the things that have worked in terms of trying to ensure that these things happen. Of course, life happens, but at least I'm making the effort to be intentional, because oftentimes we think about it, but then we don't do anything. So problematic.
It's so simple and so effective. Know yourself. Are you a morning person? Are you an afternoon person? Are you an evening person? And then schedule it. If you want to get it done, put it on the calendar, and hopefully your chances of getting to it will increase.
Absolutely.
It's only natural that when we're able to draw on our physical and mental resources, well, then we can support ourselves and others better. And yet we don't make it a priority most of the time.
Yes, that darn human side of us.
That's so true. You've mentioned burned out and stressed out. I'm curious to know, do any of these strategies make a difference when stress increases, in particular as a result of organizational change?
I would definitely say so. Change in any organization is inevitable. That's just a constant. And there are some small, more insignificant instances of change, and then there are the larger versions of it. And generally speaking, when I was reading, we have our white paper on this concept of change. And one of the statistics in there that they talk about is that millennials and Gen Xers report being about 40 to 50% of them report being in this constant chronic state of stress.
Yeah, I was shocked about that number.
Exactly. So it's not just when, a looming deadline is coming up. It's not just when, this project that needs to be done, or, something is just happening in the workplace. It's this constant state of stress at all times. And so being aware of when you're operating in that place and space, again, talking about this idea of awareness, and it's of course the self-awareness when you're thinking about yourself, but also having the awareness of it when it's showing up in your team members, seeing where there might be changes in behavior, changes in, how they're showing up, if they're looking like that, they don't look like themselves. Just having that awareness alone is helpful in these conversations about, again, trying to tackle either the episodic stress moments or that constant chronic stress, because it can lead to other dysfunctional behaviors, the indulging in alcohol, overeating, abuse in some way, shape, or form. And so we want to try to head that off at the pass. And if it's you, being aware of those things and how it's showing up for you and what the source of those issues might be is key for you to, be able to even tackle it. But if it's someone that's around you, asking, just checking in and asking how they're doing, what's going on, creating a safe space for them to talk if you have that level of trust between you, so that they can talk through what might be going on with them, or, you might just serve as a listening ear to this person in that moment that they might need. And they may not even realize that this is what's going on with them. And so it might take awareness from someone else saying something to them to bring awareness to them about how this is showing up for them, or what this looks like for them, and how it might be impacting their work. Because ultimately, that lack of well-being, that lack of wellness does impact our work. There is a spectrum when it comes to these conversations about well-being and mental health and just wellness in general. And, there's the places and spaces where people might be thriving. Some people may be in a place of simply surviving. And some people might be in a place and space where they're struggling. They're in trouble in some way, shape, or form. And so it takes us paying attention to those around us and paying attention to ourselves to really see how that shows up, particularly in times of change, because times of change challenge people in a variety of ways that they may not anticipate, that we just need to be cognizant of.
Yeah. And to build on that point, I guess most leaders would probably say that they want to nurture a workplace culture that promotes well-being. Mm-hmm. Of course, who wouldn't?
Of course.
But what would you say is the hardest thing about accessing any of the strategies that enhance well-being and wellness, both individually and from an organizational perspective?
I think from the individual perspective, no one wants to be seen as the weak link. They don't want people to judge them for whatever it is they may be dealing with, to judge them for potentially not being able to show up in the way that they would like to be perceived or like to be seen. No one wants anyone to think, negatively about them, because they just might have a moment where there may be a little struggle, or they may not show up in their highest capacity. And so people will try to put aside what they might be going through to continue to push through and to get it done. But as we both know, it will probably show itself in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes it could be a matter of people missing deadlines, or people forgetting to do things, or snippiness. If you say something to them, it can show up in a variety of different ways. And so that's part of the struggle on the individual level.
So important. Leaders have such a key role when navigating those change moments.
Definitely. So yes, with the leadership level, the struggle in trying to really put those strategies into place is because they also have organizational priorities. First and foremost, there's an organization that needs to be run. There are goals that need to be achieved, objectives that need to be met. And so, but when we have to take the time to really kind of focus on what's going on with our team members at an individual level or emotional level, that takes time.
Yes.
That absolutely takes time. And sometimes there can be impatience in the process, wanting to really kind of just work through the change and not deal with the things that come along with that change. Sometimes it can just be a culture issue where there's a disconnect between the culture and what needs to happen. There's fear that may also influence the situation. There's a number of different factors that really can contribute to whether or not an organization effectively handles the change, while also paying attention to and catering to those that make the work possible. It's not something that is either or. Both need to happen, but it can be much easier said than done at times.
Yeah, and some of them might feel like they're not ready, they're not equipped, they're not prepared for it. So it can be a little intimidating, I guess.
Sure. And I can definitely understand that. If that's not something that you're really familiar with, or you don't have a lot of background on, or even, you don't feel you have any expertise in that area, it can be hard to understand what your role is in the situation. It can be hard to really navigate, okay, how do I most effectively, show up for this person while also still managing, the things that I need to take care of as a leader? How do I show that empathy? How do I really show this person that I care? How do I effectively communicate with this person without disregarding where they are in their process or in their journey?
Right. Yeah. Have you seen in your experience that organizations, by and large, make wellness and well-being a priority? And if not, why is that not the case? Do you think?
So I have seen some organizations that do an amazing job at doing this. And I think they get the connection. One of their most valuable assets are their people. These are their internal customers. And they understand that if we take care of them, they will take care of us. So they've made that a priority. They've made the connection. They understand that human beings bring that humanity to the workplace in all different ways and shapes and forms. And that affects how they show up in the workplace. That affects productivity. That affects this ultimate success of the organization. Then I've seen some other organizations where they haven't quite gotten to that point yet. I think some of the reasons are just, in part, it's a lack of knowledge on how to even proceed with this, what that might look like within their organization. Some organizations, for them, it could be, hey, this is a workplace. That's not something that, we really are interested in paying attention to at this point in time for whatever reasons. And we're here to do a job, and that's what we're going to do. Other workplaces, it could be a matter of just the unknown. How much will this cost? How much time will this take? What will this require of me, as a leader in this organization if we go in this direction? And what are the, particular benefits? So it's just a matter of being educated about what it could do for the organization. But I'm of the thought that, again, when you take care of your people, they will take care of you. And you, as a leader and the organization, will reap the benefits of taking care of people and really paying attention to their well-being.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you for that. I often hear, well, we're a business. And we're not really in the business of developing well-being for our folks or happiness. And it reminds me of the Abraham Lincoln quote, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Well, I guess you could apply that to well-being in the workplace. You don't want well-being? Well, how about absenteeism? How about low productivity? How about low engagement? How about all the destructive behaviors, right?
Absolutely.
I know I'm talking to the choir, but I have to vent.
But I could not agree more. I think they think about the upfront costs of this idea of going in that direction without really thinking about, okay, well, what's at risk if we do not go in this direction? And as you said, any number of things, absenteeism, engagement, all a whole host of other issues will surface in your workplace in some way, shape, or form. The culture suffers, the work suffers, your results suffer, your revenue suffers. And so it's a domino effect that if you do not take the time to pay attention to this, you're going to pay the price in some way, shape, or form. So what does that look like for you?
That's right. Yeah. And we know that many and a growing number of organizations do that, and leaders do that. Can you share any positive examples that we can learn from of teams, companies that implement those well-being initiatives in their own organizations?
Sure. So I'm going to have to go back to the university that I mentioned earlier in the podcast. So this is George Mason University. It's in a university in Northern Virginia. And they really took the conversation about well-being to heart. They make it a part of just the everyday experience of anybody that touches the organization. So they have a number of workshops and courses related to the conversation about well-being throughout the school year. Their students have well-being initiatives that they really amplify at all times. No one on that campus has not been touched by the conversation about well-being. They have made it a priority for that conversation to be amplified in all ways, shapes, or form. And now they offer a certificate in leadership coaching that's focused on well-being as well. So for people to come and be able to do their certification program and get that type of certificate. But they also have like a dorm that is focused on well-being. So they have built it into the culture, the very being of the organization. And then, of course, they provide the resources and tools to continue to walk that talk. So people have access to a variety of resources that they can take advantage of that will contribute to their well-being in the workplace and beyond. They have the conversations, the constant conversations about it all the time. And again, it's something that is also, proudly posted on their website. This is something that has become the way of being for all of the people that are involved at that university. And so for me, that has always stuck out, that they're just kind of waved their flag and shouted out proudly that this is something that's important to them. And they demonstrate that with their people at all times.
Wow, this is a great example. And clearly one of the leading academic institutions at the forefront of this well-being revolution.
Yes.
Cachet, sadly, we're coming to the end of our allotted time, so this is my last question. Do you think the role of wellness and well-being in organizations in particular will pass, decrease, or rather increase in the years to come?
Well, I definitely believe that this is going to be a continued conversation for many years to come. The reality is that each of our respective workplaces and businesses, there's not going to be a decrease in productivity. There's always going to be an increased need for productivity. We also have an aging population as well that we have to consider in this conversation, and reduction in workforces, which will ultimately equate to this idea of the pressure for change in some way, shape, or form. And along with that change, there are increased anxieties. There are stressors. There can be overwhelm for the people that are a part of whatever the change might look like. And so I definitely believe that this is going to be a continued conversation about well-being, and that companies really need to look at how they are encouraging these conversations. How are they creating the space for well-being in the workplace? Because again, each of your team members is a human being, and they bring that humanity to the workplace. And there are things within the workplace that contribute to positively and negatively to their well-being, as well as those things outside of the workplace that do the same. When it comes to conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, when you think about the variety of different backgrounds that your team members come from, there are issues that some team members might deal with that other team members may not, just because of the diverse background that they come from, that need to also be a part of the conversation. And there's also the conversation about intersectionality when it comes to people's identities. When we think about the intersections of people's identities, because we all have a number of different identities, but when certain identities come together for certain individuals, it leads to even more issues and can lead to even more stressors and problems for them. So how are we having those conversations in our workplace? How are we helping people to work through these issues? How are we acknowledging the particular issues that some might go through that others may not go through, so that we can help each of these individuals to show up as their best selves, so that they will give us their best selves and we can thrive as an organization. And so again, just considering those things, considering new technology that is always coming up on the forefront, and the stress that can come along with that. There's so many different things that need to be considered. Competition when it comes to your talent pools and gaining talent for your organization. There's so many things to consider along the way. And so companies really need to think about, okay, this is something that is going to be an ever-present conversation. How do we proactively address it? How do we proactively engage in this space so that we don't have to suffer the consequences of being reactive when it comes to this conversation about well-being and wellness when it comes to our people?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights, Cachet. You gave us a lot to think about. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode. We look forward to seeing you on another episode of the Mindset Advantage podcast series from Arcadia Consulting.
You've been listening to The Mindset Advantage. Follow Arcadia Consulting on social media platforms to stay updated.